25. 1. Supreme Magus. Chapter 649 Tough Calls Part 1. Lith didn't play favorites and obeyed his orders. Professor Gaku was his first choice, being the youngest among her peers and a language expert. Then came Professor Nishal. Her condition was as bad as the others, but she was the only master warden in the group, so Lith presumed he might still need her help. After saving them, Lith had enough strength to save only one professor. His choice was between Professor Elkas from the Fire Griffin, the one who was better at deciphering the ODI language, and Professor Syndra, who was a war mage. The ODI's protections were all heavyweight and Syndra could kill dozens of enemies with a single spell. Professor Festa from the White Griffin was the most useless member of the team. Aside from a historian, she was also a master alchemist and a mage knight. The former was inconsequential for the expedition and the latter was ruined by his old age. This is up to you, Floria. Both of them can be useful in their own way and their survival rate is identical. Lith said. He was panting and his breathing was irregular. Using so many times tier 4 healing magic without invigoration was truly exhausting. Thank the gods Kyla is still unconscious. She would cry her eyes out knowing the old, meek Festa is going to die. Floria thought. She wasn't faring any better than Lith. It was her life force he was using now, and even after drinking a tonic and eating some food, she still needed rest to recover. Is it impossible to save them both? She asked. Lith shook his head in reply. Then save Elkas. So far, all the threats we faced required more brain than bronze, not to mention that Syndra's contribution to the expedition has less significance compared to Elkas's. When Lith was done, both Floria and he were on the verge of fainting. Why didn't you ask Marak to contribute? He asked, glad that Solus was able to keep watch and that it would only take him a few breaths to recover in case something else happened. Because he is already tired from all the healing he performed. We need at least one person able to stand guard while we rest. Floria fell asleep the moment she finished her explanation. Lith followed her lead after using invigoration to restore half of his strength, just to be safe. Luckily, the arrays were all still standing since Professor Nishal was alive and well. Marak's guard duty was hellish due to his fatigue but relatively safe. When Lith woke up, bad news was waiting for the survivors of the expedition team. Professors Festa and Syndra were dead and so was Nilla, Professor Gaku's assistant. Many tears were being shed, either due to shock or for the loss of precious friends. The professors had known each other for years and even if they were rivals, they still respected their competition. On top of that, seeing a veteran mage die that easily filled their hearts with the fear of being the next one to fall. Raynor was crying like a lamb sent to slaughter. The easiest expedition my ass. We're dying like flies. Professor Yandra, please, I want to go home. Field work is bound to be unpredictable, son. We came searching for ruins and we found a military compound. No one could have predicted this outcome, otherwise the team would have been assembled very differently. It was Kallil's naivety that brought this disaster upon himself and us as well. She replied, bursting into a violent cough she was unable to repress. To save her beloved assistant, the old professor had given her all and some more. Raynor regained his cool, performing on his mentor a quick diagnostic spell. Oh gods, Professor Yandra, what have you done? Don't speak, you need to rest. He forced her to lie down. Despite her protests, Yandra was now weaker than a child and unable to get up without help. Thinking about his previous words, Raynor felt like an egotistical prick. He went in search of a healer while cursing himself for his helplessness. Kyla was still asleep, the professors were still weakened, leaving only Marak or Lith as a possible choice. Professor Yandra and Ranger Verhan are in a good relationship. He should be willing to help, Raynor thought. The youth was shocked seeing the ranger's appearance. Floria and Marak had suffered no damage as well, but even after 8 hours they still bore the signs of exhaustion. Floria was slightly pale and had bags under her eyes despite having plenty of sleep. Lith, instead, looked like someone who had just arrived there after a relaxing vacation. How is this possible? You have fought that thing, healed people, and yet you look amazing. Do you have a reason to disturb me or are you just hitting on me? Lith had relieved Marak from guard duty for a while, to allow his fellow ranger to get some sleep. Raynor inwardly cursed and explained to him how dire Yandra's condition was. Lith wouldn't have believed a single word if not for the honest fear he could see in Raynor's eyes. It's impossible. I personally checked on her before going to sleep, but taking a second look can't hurt. You stay here and if any of the traps I set up make a single noise, scream. Raynor nodded, staring at the tunnels in front of him as they were the open maws of as many beasts, ready to release unknown horrors upon him. He was scared of them, but he was terrified at the idea of losing the closest thing to a family he had ever had, so he calmed his heart and kept an ear to the ground. Lith discovered that Yandra's condition was actually worse than Raynor had described. Her life force was such a mess that he needed to use his tier 5 scanner and chisel spells to stabilize her. The moment he was done, she opened her eyes abruptly. What the heck did you do to damage yourself that badly? Lith asked. I simply did what was necessary. Raynor and the other assistants needed help. If it wasn't for this old body, the poor Nilla would still be alive. I collapsed before treating her. Yandra sighed. That was stupid of you, it almost cost you your life. Nilla was barely 20. She has had all her life in front of her whereas I squandered mine. I spent so much time researching magic that I almost lost my family more than once. My children may recognize my face, but they don't know me at all. Her voice was filled with regret while her eyes looked past Lith, staring at visions of all her past mistakes. Yandra now regretted many things and wished she had made different choices in her life. That's why I want to retire and why I approached you. I want someone to relieve me of the burden of my magical legacy. Most of all, I know you can use rejuvenation magic. Please, give me back my strength. I beg of you. I can't keep living like a helpless fool, incapable of protecting even what she holds dear the most. Yandra looked at Lith's face, finding sympathy, compassion, and more. She felt like she was staring into the eyes of an ancient creature, something whose feelings were smothered by the dust of centuries and too many still open wounds. Supreme Magus. By Novel 2025. 1. Supreme Magus. Chapter 650 Tough Calls Part 2. I can do that, even now, he said, yet Yandra was unable to rejoice at those words. There was no warmth in them. My price is steep, though. As long as it doesn't involve high treason or murder, I'm willing to pay. Be it in gold or artifacts, I don't care. They would be part of my legacy anyway, she replied. Lith was actually more interested in her knowledge. Yandra was a royal forge master and a leading figure among historians. She could help him deciphering the mysteries of her real. If only I could trust her, I'd take both the runed sword and the booklet out of my pocket dimension right now. First, I'll make her indebted to me, then I'll find a way to put her to the test. Maybe I could pretend to find a page of the booklet inside Kula and study her reaction. Lith kept planning his next moves while rejuvenating Yandra's body. Rejuvenating magic was healing magic capable of detecting and fixing all the marks that the passage of time inflicted on the human body. On paper it was something simple, but officially there were only 4 mages capable of performing it in the entire Griffin Kingdom. Professors Manoir, Vaster, Marth, and of course, Lith. He realigned Yandra's spine and bones while also fixing her muscles. Healing magic was no miracle, it simply sped up the natural healing process. A broken bone would still present traces of being fractured after being healed, scar tissues would be formed after an internal injury. Rejuvenating magic was the only thing that could rebuild rather than repair an injured body, even returning worn cartilages to their mint condition. Lith did all he could, but was forced to stop halfway through. The damage you have inflicted to your life force needs time to heal. If I proceed any further, it would do you more harm than good, he said. Yandra nodded. She felt terribly fatigued, and even though she had just woken up, the only thing the old professor wanted was to fall asleep again. Yet she could already feel different, as if a weight had been removed from her shoulders and another from her chest. Breathing was much easier and none of her joints bothered her, no matter the position she took. It doesn't matter, we can always resume later. I feel like I'm 20 years younger, Yandra said before losing consciousness. Lith placed his hand over her shoulder, checking her life force. That was the real source of a human's lifespan. He had treated Nana countless times with rejuvenating magic, allowing her to spend her last years free from all the symptoms of old age, yet death had come for her anyway. She got this close to shorten her lifespan just to help those useless brats, and so did Kyla. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother saving this kind of people over and over. Lith thought, yet the resemblance between the professor and his old mentor led his hand to sweep her hair away from her face, to let her breathe better. For the same reason you protected Carl from your father when he became his favorite target. Or when you choose to take care of Tista's illness. You could have always taken the easy way out and only cared about yourself. Solis said. Yet how would you feel if Kyla died? If any of those few people you let into your life disappeared and you didn't do anything to prevent it? Lith knew the answer all too well. He remembered how he felt after his brother's death. Derek was Carl's only beneficiary, so between the inheritance and the money Derek had accumulated for his brother's college and wedding, he had so much money he had no idea what to do with them. Yet all he had been left with was an empty life, dragging his feet forward just waiting for death well before he discovered to have lung cancer. It was how the void inside of him had been born, and Uriel's death had only made it bigger, just like Nana's. Still upset from Solis's words, Lith returned in front of the tunnels. To Raynor, Lith said, Yandra is okay now, she just needs to rest. Send the other professors to me the moment they wake up. They need to know what kind of monsters we are about to face. The youth thanked him many times, giving Lith such deep bows that his head almost touched the ground. Yet Lith didn't care. His gaze was fixated onto the caves, praying for something to attack him and provide him the opportunity to vent his rage. Thinking about all those he had lost during his lives, Lith had finally realized how close he had come to losing Kyla as well. His hatred, the ODI, for what they had done to the fungus creature, was beyond what words could express. With their actions, they had messed with what he could only think of as his turf. The hours passed and nothing happened. The few creatures that stumbled in the vicinity of the camp ran away as soon as they perceived his murderous intent targeting them. Floria went to keep him company as soon as she was certain that Kyla was out of danger and that nothing had happened to the soldiers she had tasked with guarding Kula's gate. It seems I'll have to learn healing magic as well. Now I understand why Dad says that a good mage must never stop learning, and why my mother is so happy not being a mage. She sighed. Tier 5 is really an edge case. Unless one wants to become a professional healer, but yes, I agree. You should learn at least Tier 4. Regrowing limbs and sharing life force is much more important than one could think. Lith offered her a few sweets from his pocket dimension along with a cup of hot tea. By the way, thanks for saving Kyla. I don't know how you did it, since according to both Yandra and Marak she was on the brink of death. She said with a casual tone, never stopping to look in his eyes. Thanks for the heads up. Lith nodded, thinking about a plausible explanation for his feat. Yeah, consider that it's amazing how you managed to help her and the others even after an all-out battle against such a powerful creature. There was no curiosity in her voice, only worry. Floria had given up on Lith explaining her how he performed his miracles. She just wanted him to be aware of what the rest of the expedition knew about the most recent events. Sure, Yandra seemed a nice woman and Marak seemed indifferent to anything that didn't involve him directly, but she had learned how deceiving appearances could be. There were few people whom Floria really trusted, and still fewer of whom she thought well. Lith was one of them and she hoped that one day he would feel the same about her. It wasn't as hard as you might think. Lith lied with such grace that Floria almost fell for it. Unfortunately, almost wasn't enough, dealing another blow to her feelings. Lith explained to her how the creature had been enslaved and that instead of defeating it, he had just set it free. The ODI really were shameless in their use of forbidden magic. After what had happened to Uriel, Floria had a bone to pick against anyone who used slave items almost as big as Lith's,